The laughter hit like knives. I sat on the edge of the sofa, wine glass in hand, surrounded by our friends while Matthew told yet another funny story. This time about how I burned a romantic dinner last week. It wasn't true, not really, but truth never stopped him before. He added a smug twist about how I couldn't even boil water without a crisis, and everyone chuckled. I forced a smile. My cheeks burned. Inside, something cracked. He draped his arm around me and delivered the final line. Something crude about making up for my bad cooking in the bedroom. More laughter. I stayed silent, but not because I was weak. No, I was waiting. My name is Tasha Reynolds. I'm 32, a marketing executive, and for 5 years, I let my husband turn me into a punchline. But tonight, I'm rewriting the joke, somehow toss him out of a tidy. Stay with me to see how exposing one secret at a dinner party flipped the script on my cruel husband and gave me the last laugh. They met at a corporate networking event 5 years ago. Tasha had been representing her firm, a rising star in Houston's marketing scene, known for closing big clients and leading sharp creative teams. Matthew arrived late, dressed in a sleek navy suit, armed with confidence and jokes that made the whole room laugh. He teased her for spilling wine on her dress, then offered a napkin with a wink. "You're adorable when you flustered," he said. It was the kind of line that felt flirtatious, not cruel. That night, Tasha mistook his mockery for charm. At first, Matthew's teasing felt harmless before I knew her. A quip about her bad sense of direction, a joke about her wardrobe choices. But over time, the humor sharpened. What once made her laugh began making her doubt herself. In private, he would criticize her meals. In public, he'd make cracks about her appearance or claim she always ran west or taff-a-rest. So Tasha smiled along. But each smile chipped away at her. What cut deepest wasn't just the cruelty of his words. It was the contrast between the Tasha she was at work and the one she became at home. At the office, she managed million-dollar advertising campaigns, mentored interns, and spoke confidently to C-section executives. She had been praised in Forbes for her creative leadership, but at home, she was the butt of every punchline, reduced to a character. When she shared her promotion news one night, Matthew joked that she probably slept through the meeting. Another time, he made up a story about her crying during a presentation, claiming she forgot a client's name. None of it was true, but he told it so often, she started to second-guess her own memory. Their wedding day should have been a warning. During his speech, Matthew had the entire room in stitches with tales of her clumsiness, her inability to follow recipes, her love of talking in circles. Her father looked visibly uncomfortable, but everyone else laughed. Tasha had laughed too, brushing it off as nerves, as his unique way of showing affection. But it never stopped. As the years went on, intimacy issues began to surface. At first, Matthew blamed stress. Then he implied it was she, too clingy. Eventually they saw a doctor, and the truth came out. Matthew had been diagnosed with erectile dysfunction. The doctor had suggested therapy, openness, even medication, but Matthew rejected all of it. What he accepted, however, was the opportunity to humiliate her. He told his friends that she was frigid, hard to please, even cold. When she overheard him on the phone telling his best friend that she couldn't satisfy a toaster, her heart cracked in half. Still, she protected him. She kept his secret. She told herself it was a medical issue, not a character flaw, and she loved him enough to guard his vulnerability. But the more she stayed silent, the more he filled that silence with laughter, at her expense. The imbalance grew unbearable. Tasha felt like she was shrinking inside her own life, her confidence slowly corroded by years of mockery disguised as affection. She still hoped for change. She still believed the man she met at that corporate event was in there somewhere. But lately, every joke felt like another nail in the coffin of who she used to be. And yet, she endured it all. His secret, his slander, his cruelty, until the night she decided not to. It was supposed to be a casual dinner with friends. Just a few bottles of wine, some comfort food, and laughter to cap off a long work week. But as always, it turned into the Matthew show. Tasha sat on the couch, her wine glass gripped tightly in one hand, as her husband stood in the center of their living room performing for their guests. You should have seen her trying to tell a story the other day. Matthew said, grinning wide. It was like watching someone try to parallel park with a blindfold. Just aimless, slow, painful. Laughter rippled through the room, though not as full-throated as usual. Tasha forced a smile and looked down. She'd hoped to use this evening to share her recent promotion, senior campaign strategist at her firm, a title she'd earned through years of dedication. She took a breath and began. Actually, I got some good news at work this week. Oh, right, Matthew interrupted, sliding his arm around her shoulders in that familiar, possessive way. She probably slept through the meeting and got promoted by accident. Either that or they just felt sorry for her. More laughter, louder this time. Tasha's lips pressed into a tight line. She felt Jennifer's eyes on her from across the room, soft, uncertain. And then came the story. You all remember that romantic dinner she tried to cook last week, Matthew said. It was like a 5-hour arm fire in our kitchen. Smoke everywhere, burnt chicken, raw potatoes. She tried so hard, bless her heart. Tasha looked around the room. Everyone laughed again. Brad, Susan, Mark. But not Jennifer. She sipped her wine slowly, her expression unreadable. Tasha had spent hours preparing that dinner. It was meant to be a night of connection, a chance to finally talk about their distance. She'd lit candles, played soft jazz, cooked his favorite meal. But Matthew had called, late again, and distracted her long enough for the pan to smoke. He never even mentioned the... Seriously, though, Matthew added, his voice dropping just enough to sound intimate. I keep her satisfied in other ways. Right, honey? The laughter this time was louder, dirtier. Tasha's cheeks flushed crimson, her stomach twisted. He was doing it again, twisting private pain into public entertainment. The joke was clear. The implications stung. Everyone knew they'd been married 5 years with no children. They didn't know why. And now, thanks to his smirk and that glint in his eye, they'd be left to assume it was her fault. Tasha caught Jennifer's gaze again. It was filled with something different now. Pity? Disapproval? Solidarity? Tasha couldn't tell. But something had shifted. In that moment, as the laughter rolled around her, something inside her broke free. For years, she'd let Matthew write the script of their marriage. She'd allowed his jokes to shape how others saw her. But tonight, for the first time, she realized that her silence wasn't grace. It was permission. And she wasn't giving it anymore. Tasha sat quietly in the kitchen after their guests had left, the wine glasses half. She'd protected Matthew's secret for 2 years, covered his shame, shielded him from judgment, and allowed him to build his ego on her silence. But tonight had ripped the last shred of patience from her. She replayed the phone call she'd overheard last week. Matthew on the phone with Brad, his voice casual, smug. She's frigid, man, ice cold. It's like trying to kiss a wall. Her heart had shattered in that moment. The man who had begged her to keep his diagnosis private, the man who swore it would destroy him if people found out, had turned around and weaponized their intimacy against her. He wasn't protecting his pride. He was offloading his shame onto her. She walked to her bedroom, closed the door, and sat at her vanity. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman worn down by years of biting comments and public mockery. But beneath that weariness was something new, resolve. She grabbed a notepad from her nightstand drawer and began making a mental checklist. First, remember the facts. 2 years ago, after months of awkward excuses, they saw a specialist. The diagnosis was clear: psychogenic erectile dysfunction, stress-induced, reversible, and manageable with therapy. But Matthew had refused treatment. Instead, he redirected his frustration and self-loathing toward her. Every joke he told was a smokescreen to keep anyone from questioning his masculinity. Second, confront the manipulation. Tasha had always tried to be understanding, patient, even hopeful. She told herself that protecting him was the compassionate thing to do, but it hadn't made him better. It had only enabled his cruelty. Third, reclaim her voice. If Matthew could broadcast lies in front of friends, she had every right to speak the truth. She had spent too many nights rehearsing arguments in her head, imagining confrontations that never happened. Now, those rehearsals became preparation. She wasn't just confronting Matthew, she was preparing to dismantle the image he'd so carefully constructed. Fourth, prepare for the fallout. This wouldn't just affect her marriage, it would shock their entire social circle. These were people who had laughed at her expense, unknowingly complicit in her slow emotional erosion. Tasha would have to stand in the center of that room and deliver the truth without flinching. She needed to be steady, precise, and unshakable. She didn't sleep much that night. Instead, she gathered emotional strength, recalling every cruel comment, every false story, every silent cry she'd swallowed down. They were no longer wounds, they were fuel. She wasn't just planning a confrontation, she was planning her liberation. And for the first time in years, the thought of standing up didn't scare her. It thrilled her. Back in the living room, Matthew stood with a drink in his hand, pacing in front of the fireplace like he was hosting a late-night comedy show. The guests were seated, half listening, half laughing, sipping wine as his stories rolled on, one more humiliating than the last. Tasha sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap, face expressionless as he launched into his next bit. And get this, Matthew said with a chuckle. Tasha actually thinks we're ready to start trying for kids. Can you imagine? He paused for effect, waiting for the room to catch up. She can barely keep a plant alive without Googling it. The laughter came slower this time. Unsure. Awkward. Jennifer shifted in her seat. Brad stared into his glass. Tasha felt her heartbeat slow. This was the moment. She rose calmly, her voice cutting through the room like a bell. Maybe, she said, you should tell them why we really don't have kids. Matthew froze, his smile slipping just a fraction. Sweetheart, he said lightly, don't embarrass yourself again. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed, Tasha replied, her tone even. She turned to the guests. 2 years ago, we saw a doctor. The diagnosis was clear. Matthew has erectile dysfunction. Complete. And he refused treatment. That's the real reason we're childless. Silence fell like a curtain. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Matthew's jaw clenched, his posture rigid. Wow, he muttered. You really are drunk. No, Matthew, she said. I'm just done being your scapegoat. I protected your secret for 2 years while you used me as the punchline to every joke. You needed someone to blame, so you picked me. Jennifer slowly set her wine down. Actually, she said, her voice hesitant but firm. I heard you, Matthew, on the phone. With Brad, you said Tasha was frigid and that you were doing all the work to keep things alive in the bedroom. I didn't want to believe it, but now... Brad looked up, eyes wide. Jen, she continued, it's time we stop pretending we don't hear him. Matthew's face reddened. You're all turning on me now? What, you think she's telling the truth? That I'm the broken one? Tasha didn't flinch. I never cared about the diagnosis, Matthew. I cared about you. I stayed, supported you, even when you refused help. But you took your shame and twisted it into weapons. You mocked my cooking, my job, my looks, because you couldn't handle your own failure. That's not fair, Matthew snapped. You made me feel like less of a man. She cut in. You made yourself small and tried to drag me with you. But I'm done shrinking. Jennifer looked around. We've all laughed at your jokes, Matthew. But they weren't jokes. They were cover for cruelty. Brad rubbed the back of his neck. Man, I didn't know. I thought it was just how you two were. You knew, Tasha said. You all did. But now you know the full story. Matthew stood in stunned silence, the air around him thick with his unraveling control. No one laughed. No one defended him. The room that had once echoed with his ridicule now mirrored his isolation. And for the first time, Tasha wasn't the one shrinking. She was standing tall, in the truth finally heard, finally seen. Matthew's face, still red from the fallout, twitched with something colder now, rage disguised as confidence. He reached for the last weapon he thought he had. "You know what, Tasha? Since we're telling the truth now, why don't you tell them how you really got that promotion?" The room tensed again. Matthew took a step forward, his tone sharp and mocking. "Let's stop pretending you got it because of your brilliant mind or whatever. Everyone knows how these things work. Late nights at the office, private dinners with your boss. Tell me, Tasha, how many projects did you actually lead, without assistance between the sheets?" There was a gasp from someone near the back. Tasha's jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. Not yet. "Go on," Matthew pushed, emboldened by his own venom. "Tell them the truth. Or should I?" A voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'll tell them." Everyone turned as the front door opened. Alex stepped into the room, elegant and calm, holding a leather folder in her hand. The room went dead quiet. Even Matthew, mid-breath, froze. "I've been standing outside for the last 10 minutes, Alex said evenly, closing the door behind her. "Long enough to hear plenty." Tasha blinked in disbelief. She had completely forgotten Alex had planned to swing by to drop off signed contracts for next week's board meeting. The timing was unreal, but perfect. Alex stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. "Tasha didn't get her promotion through favors, Matthew. She earned it. She brought in the Peterson account, our largest in 5 years. She worked late with the entire Q4 strategy while juggling 2 major client pitches, and she did it while managing your emotional nonsense, though I suppose I didn't realize how extensive it was until now." Matthew's mouth opened, then closed. His swagger vanished. "This is a private matter." Alex gave him a cold smile. "Nothing's private with you, Matthew. Isn't that your whole routine? Making everything a public spectacle for your amusement?" He turned to the guests, desperate. "Come on, you don't believe her, do you? You've all seen how she flirts her way through work." "Enough," Jennifer snapped. Even Brad looked away, ashamed. "It's done, man. You need to stop." Matthew's mask cracked completely. "She's trying to make me look like the bad guy. You think this makes her better than me? She's pathetic. She's just trying to turn everyone against me." "No, Matthew," Tasha said quietly, stepping forward. "You did that all by yourself. Every time you mocked me in front of these people, every time you twisted our private life into a joke, every lie you told to hide your shame. I didn't ruin your image. You did." He tried again, his voice trembling now. "You think humiliating me makes you powerful?" "No," she said. "Owning my truth makes me powerful. Telling my story makes me free. And what you think of me doesn't matter anymore." His eyes flickered, reaching for anything. "You'll regret this. You'll be alone." "I've already been alone," she said. "For 5 years, sitting next to a man who only saw me as material for a punchline. This is the first time I feel surrounded by people who see the truth." He took a step forward. "If you walk away now, don't even think about coming back." Tasha didn't flinch. She turned to the room, her tone measured, dignified. "Thank you all for coming, but the party's over." She didn't look back as she crossed the room, walking past Matthew, past their stunned friends, and out the front door. Her heart was pounding, but her steps were steady. No more silence, no more pretending. The power was hers now, and she wasn't giving it back. 6 months later, Tasha's world looked nothing like the one she had left behind. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells and swallowing laughter to make room for someone else's ego. Her mornings now began with sunshine streaming through her bright coral curtains and the smell of fresh coffee brewed just the way she liked it, strong, unapologetic, and full of flavor. Her apartment radiated warmth, with colorful rugs, artwork that made bold statements, and a bookshelf lined with stories she finally had time to enjoy. Professionally, Tasha was thriving. The promotion had been just the beginning. Since then, she'd spearheaded 2 high-profile campaigns, both of which exceeded expectations and brought in record numbers for her firm. Clients specifically asked for her by name. She was no longer the woman behind the curtain, making others look good. She was the face of success now. Her boss, Alex, not only championed her work, but also encouraged her to mentor newer hires. Tasha embraced the role wholeheartedly, creating a monthly Women Who Lead roundtable that quickly became one of the most talked-about internal programs at the company. Outside the office, her life had blossomed in new, meaningful ways. Jennifer, once just a friend of a friend, became one of her closest confidants. They met weekly for dinner or coffee, swapping stories, laughing about the absurdities they used to tolerate, and celebrating the lives they were finally building for themselves. Jennifer often said that watching Tasha speak up had given her the courage to walk away from her own unhappy marriage, and Tasha never took that lightly. Their friendship reminded Tasha that healing didn't have to happen alone. She rebuilt her circle with intention, surrounding herself with people who didn't mock or belittle her but instead saw her strength, her brilliance, and her heart. Laughter returned to her life, not as a weapon, but as a balm. Soft, healing, and entirely hers. The divorce, when it came, was quiet. Matthew signed the papers without a fight. Perhaps he feared what else might come out if he tried to contest it. His silence was a far cry from the man who once thrived on being the center of attention. Tasha didn't celebrate his downfall. She simply let it be. Some stories didn't need a dramatic ending, just closure. What mattered most was how free she felt. She no longer questioned her intelligence, her ambition, or her worth. The voice in her head, the one that once echoed with Matthew's cruel jokes, had gone quiet, replaced by one that spoke with compassion and conviction. She smiled more. She took up photography again. She started planning a solo trip to Italy. Tasha had stopped being the punchline. Now, she was writing her own story. Bold, beautiful, and entirely her own. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She'd already done the hardest part. She'd found her way back to herself. And this time, no one would be laughing at her. Only with her. 6 months later, Tasha's world looked nothing like the one she had left behind. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells and swallowing laughter to make room for someone else's ego. Her mornings now began with sunshine streaming through her bright coral curtains and the smell of fresh coffee brewed just the way she liked it. Strong, unapologetic, and full of flavor. Her apartment radiated warmth, with colorful rugs, artwork that made bold statements, and a bookshelf lined with stories she finally had time to enjoy. Professionally, Tasha was thriving. The promotion had been just the beginning. Since then, she'd spearheaded 2 high-profile campaigns, both of which exceeded expectations and brought in record numbers for her firm. Clients specifically asked for her by name. She was no longer the woman behind the curtain, making others look good. She was the face of success now. Her boss not only championed her work, but also encouraged her mentor newer hires. Tasha embraced the role wholeheartedly, creating a monthly Women Who Lead roundtable that quickly became one of the most talked-about internal programs at the company. Inside the office, her life had blossomed in new, meaningful ways. Jennifer, once just a friend of a friend, became one of her closest confidants. They met weekly for dinner or coffee, swapping stories, laughing about the absurdities they used to tolerate, and celebrating the lives they were finally building for themselves. Jennifer often said that watching Tasha speak up had given her the courage to walk away from her own unhappy marriage, and Tasha never took that lightly. Their friendship reminded Tasha that healing didn't have to happen alone. She rebuilt her circle with intention, surrounding herself with people who didn't mock or belittle her but instead saw her strength, her brilliance, and her heart. Laughter returned to her life, not as a weapon, but as a balm. Soft, healing, and entirely hers. The divorce, when it came, was quiet. Matthew signed the papers without a fight. Perhaps he feared what else might come out if he tried to contest it. His silence was a far cry from the man who once thrived on being the center of attention. Tasha didn't celebrate his downfall. She simply let it be. Some stories didn't need a dramatic ending, just closure. What mattered most was how free she felt. She no longer questioned her intelligence, her ambition, or her worth. The voice in her head, the one that once echoed with Matthew's cruel jokes, had gone quiet, replaced by one that spoke with compassion and conviction. She smiled more. She took up photography again. She started planning a solo trip to Italy. Tasha had stopped being the punchline. Now, she was writing her own story, bold, beautiful, and entirely her own. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She'd already done the hardest part. She'd found her way back to herself. And this time, no one would be laughing at her, only with. It happened on a Friday night at a downtown restaurant. Tasha had just wrapped up a celebratory dinner with her team after landing a major client. She was walking toward the exit, laughing with her colleagues, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Still can't take a joke, Tasha." Matthew was sitting alone at a corner table, swirling a glass of wine he clearly didn't enjoy. His smile was smug, but his eyes gave him away. Tired, hollow, clinging to a version of himself that no longer commanded a room. Tasha paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. Then she turned to face him, calm and clear. "Actually, Matthew," she said, "I finally realized you were one." She didn't wait for a response. She turned back around, her stride strong and unbothered, her laughter genuine, echoing as she disappeared out the door with people who truly respected her. Later that night, as she stood in front of her mirror brushing her hair, she looked at her reflection and smiled. Not the practiced smile she used to wear around Matthew, but one filled with peace. She'd taken back her voice. She'd let the truth speak louder than the lies, and she'd turned every cruel joke into a stepping stone. Real strength, she realized, isn't found in staying silent to protect someone else's comfort. It's found in standing tall, telling the truth, and walking away with your joy intact. And the best revenge? Reclaiming your power and never looking back.